Yeah, I mean, like even what I would call the marquee scare in this film, like it's
The
a
slap.
little scary.
The victory slap.
Goes slaps,
Slap.
slaps, cut, slap.
What a 5 finger say to the face.
Yeah,
Slap.
and when and it does. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Asian Blokes Podcast, a podcast where we talk about Asian pop culture, films, TV shows, comic books, anime, music, food, video games, whatever we're feeling at the time, really. My name is Dan with H, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Tavi. Hello, Tavi.
Hi, Dan.
Happy spooky season.
Happy spooky season.
Spooky season continues well into November. It's Two Asian Blokes time. Welcome.
Yes, that's right. We're back. We're back at it after a pretty long day.
Yeah, after a pretty long day.
Yeah,
We've been watching a couple of movies this weekend, doing a bit of recording as well. Today we are going to talk about two movies. You get two for the price of one.
Oh my God,
Two
that's
spooky
crazy.
movies. We are going to
What
talk about
a special treat.
The Forbidden Play, new J-horror directed by Hideo Nakata, the director of Ringu, the Ring series. And we are also going to talk about the new horror movie from...
Takashi Shimizu.
That's it, Takashi Shimizu.
Gee, we're just talking about like the grandfathers
Yeah.
of like J-horror.
So this new movie called Immersion. So at the time of recording, both of these movies have just played at the Japanese Film Festival in Melbourne.
Yeah, we haven't done one of these episodes in a while. We don't tend to do them anymore because like it's a lot of work to
Well, I
watch
mean, the
a
problem
lot of
with,
movies.
these kinds of episodes is that by the time we release them, nobody's actually seen these movies because they're not like open to the public yet.
Yeah.
So
They're too niche.
People are pretty reluctant to listen to these episodes on movies they potentially want to watch in the future, but haven't had the opportunity to watch yet.
Yeah, so I guess we should pivot into talking about the Marvels then.
Movies that are open.
We'll talk about the Marvels.
everyone.
We'll talk
But
about
no,
the Marvels for you, Lack.
It is the spooky season, so now's the time for spooky movies. And what better way to celebrate maybe potentially our last spooky episode by talking about two J-horror movies from, some of the biggest names in J-horror.
Biggest names.
Director of the Ring series and director of the Ju-on or the Grudge series. So we'll talk about these movies, non-spoilers first, and then give you fair warning before we start spoiling these movies. I mean, I don't know whether they'll be out yet by the time this episode drops, but
yeah, these kind of niche movies tend to not come out for a while. Actually, you might be surprised if you're in Australia. Some of these movies tend to come out on SBS On Demand, and SBS On Demand is free, which is like it's quite generous. There's actually been a lot of movies that I've seen that I've been looking forward to, and then just waiting for a wider release, but it never comes. Then usually Risky says like, oh yeah, I watched this movie on like SBS On Demand. Like, wait a minute, I've been looking for this movie for ages, and then I tend to end up watching it.
But we were lucky enough to watch these in a cinema, and we were also lucky enough to listen to a nice little talk from a lovely professor. I screenshotted her name. Let me get it up one sec.
I'm leaving this in.
Dr. Jessica Balanza Tegui, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, but from RMIT University, who talked us through some of the history of J-horror and specifically Takashi Shimizu's works.
Before we actually start talking about the movies, we had a pretty interesting conversation on the way home about the state of J-horror these days, or maybe lack thereof.
Yeah. I mean, you called these two movies, The Forbidden Play and Immersion, niche movies, and I would agree they're definitely niche movies, but in the early 2000s, people couldn't get enough J-horror, right? The Ring, especially the US remake, and The Grudge, the US remake of Ju-on, were definitely not niche movies at the time.
No, they're not. Yeah, there was heaps of them. Takashi Miike had a hand in his, what was it called? One Missed Call. That was like a very similar. That was like a combination of that Korean movie Phone, and a lot of the other just J horror, Onryu style ghosts.
Definitely, yeah. Even if you haven't watched those movies, you're probably familiar with the imagery behind them, like the classic Japanese, or not even Japanese, the classic Asian ghost lady.
Yeah, you've definitely
black,
seen it.
Soggy hair covering her face, dressed all in white, pale skin.
It is still like my favorite imagery out of horror. It's like it has definitely been done to death, and like I understand. It's seen as quite cheesy.
Well,
now.
I mean, it is an iconic design,
iconic,
ghost design. Like the doctor was talking about how, like in Japan, it's pretty common practice for like Sadako or Kayako to do the first pitch in baseball games. So like they've kind of been embraced into this pop culture, especially in Japan. And yeah, I mean, you've probably seen like the Scary Movie ripoffs.
Yeah.
You remember those movies, Tommy?
I do.
When parody movies were a thing?
Parody movies.
Talk about a genre that has dropped off, Tommy.
That's personally a genre that doesn't need to be there. That didn't really offer anything of value to.
Nah, people like the Scary Movie. I think people look back fondly on the Scary Movie franchise now.
I like the earlier ones, like Hot Shots.
Those ones.
Naked Gun. Yeah. I quite enjoyed those parody movies when I was a kid. Yeah.
But definitely no, they don't do that. They don't make movies like that anymore.
No.
And J-horror, as you alluded to, has kind of dropped off of recent, which we'll probably get into once we start talking about these movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I think watching these two movies especially has highlighted how much they've changed and how much as well that we've grown potentially as an audience, I guess.
Yeah, actually, you're probably right. We'll probably delve more into that as we start talking about these films.
But I think definitely The Ring and The Grudge were informative movies for both you and I because they hit us at the right time.
Yeah.
And we're probably not alone in this sentiment. Like, that's why they were so popular, because they hit people at exactly the right time. Like, offering a new kind of spin to the horror genre that wasn't like Freddy Krueger, wasn't Jason Voorhees, you know? And truly terrifying stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, do we want to get into the first movie, Tavi?
Yeah, let's just get into the first one that we watched. So
I guess we'll go chronologically. So we watched last night. We watched The Forbidden Play.
Yeah.
By
Hideo Nakata.
Nakata, yes.
So the story starts off with the husband, a happy family, and a very adorable kid.
Sure.
A very
non-threatening wife.
A very non-threatening wife and adorable kid in a kind of the happy family. And yeah, they're the opposite of what we just said. So the wife seems like she's quite happy, but then she's like, don't betray me to the husband. And then, they're hit by a car. In an accident.
The wife and their son are hit by a car, yes.
And the wife dies and the son is like seemingly dies, but then he's brought back to life by
a miracle.
Frankenstein's lightning.
Yes.
A miracle. But there's a precursor that leads to like a son kind of finding a lizard's tail and burying it in the garden. And the father's like, if you say a spell, it'll like grow a new lizard.
Yep.
And then the kid says a spell and then a new lizard actually comes out of the ground. So what the kid wants to do is like from the accident scene, he has his dead mother's finger.
Yep.
And then he buries that in the ground and then starts like saying weird spells and weird shit starts happening. But they're not the actual protagonists of the movie. No. The protagonist and probably main selling points, which I wonder if this was more just like a studio that we got to make money somehow. So we have the very lovely Kana Hashimoto, the very simp-worthy Kana Hashimoto.
Yes. So we've previously talked about her when we did our episode on the Netflix movie Remember.
The character where she is supposed to be an outsider and ugly, which does not make sense. No. But no, she's supposed to be a pretty person in this one, which is kind of part of the story. So
yeah, see, she was an ex co-worker
of Naoto. Naoto is the husband.
Yes, the husband.
Yeah.
So she comes into this story. She's turned into some kind of investigative journalist. So armed with her camera, she starts doing a bit of sleuthing. And yeah, the way she ties into the story, kind of unfolds as the story is told.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, from the outset, it's a very strong kind of setup, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's quite a strong setup. Yeah.
It's very clear. Like, you know what's going to happen, kind of.
Yeah.
But the fun of it is seeing how it happens, I guess. And kind of like, it takes a few left turns here and there, which we'll get into probably in spoiler territory. But I mean, like, tonally, what do you think about this movie?
So I'd seen some previews and posters of this movie, and like I know Hideo Nakata, his two best films, Ringu, and Dark Water. So I've known him for very like kind of like dread-worthy, like foreboding, bleak
movies,
films,
right? Yeah.
So, but I know that quite often a lot of his movies are hit and miss. And more so probably miss. He's done a fair few horror. He's like a horror guy. So I haven't seen any of his other films, much of his other movies.
Okay. Do you know if they have a similar tone to
That's
this
the thing.
one?
I think they do, because like he's done a lot of horror, and a lot of his horror movies have the same poster style as the Forbidden Play. The kind of like it looks camp, and this movie is very, very, very camp.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't even really say this is a very scary movie, unfortunately.
No, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think I would put it in the same realm as Remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of its spooks.
It's spooks, yeah.
I think the tone, because it is quite camp, it does take a bit of the dread away from it. Like, comparing it to films like Ring and Dark Water, they kind of like languish in these long, prolonged scares. I guess. Like the iconic scene of Sadako coming out of the TV. That takes a while for her to do, and it takes a while for it to get to that. Whereas this film, it's kind of like the scares are a bit more fast paced.
They're a lot more fast paced. There's quite a few scares. This is a very bombastic horror film.
And I would say there are a lot of nods to J-horror tropes.
A lot of nods to J-horror tropes. A lot of nods to his own tropes.
Yes. Yeah. There's a bit with an elevator and, like
elevator.
Spooky,
there's a very
Japanese
like
elevator.
classic like Sadako looking ghost.
Yes. Yeah, he does use
as
that.
well. Yeah. You see the ghost quite early on in this film.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Yeah, which kind of also removes the scares. I think this is a very enjoyable film, but
not particularly scary.
it's not very scary. Like, I'm not sure if I would even say this is a good movie either. Like, it falls under my like category of guilty pleasure watching.
Okay.
Just kind of like Asian horror. Like, I will consume any Asian horror, good or bad. Like, I really enjoy having like a group of friends and we just watch whatever J horror or K horror we can find. There's a few on Shudder. Me and Sunman, we watched this one called like 0.0 Hertz or something. It was about like ghosts and noise, and I don't actually remember anything from this movie. Trying to think about it.
Sure.
But like it's just fun. Risky and I think I mentioned we watched the Bridge Curse, which is on Netflix.
Okay.
That's another fun horror movie, which apparently has a good game that's on Steam. But yeah, like I enjoyed this movie. I just think overall, like the look of this movie is very like it's that very typical like Japanese pro-mist, like slightly overexposed soft look, which I'm not sure, like the colors are very like cold in this movie, but it's also like a lot of beauty shots. So it's kind of looks very good in this movie, like all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, you kind of lose the fear. You don't have that like dirty, grainy VHS-ness from the early thousands, or like the kind of the odd like digital compression rate, like things that you see in those films. So it's a very clean looking movie, but almost to the point where it's like you can tell this movie is working on a budget, you know.
I mean, I would say probably Ring had a pretty low budget at the time as well.
But I think they use that limitation quite well to like make it scarier.
I think, there's something about modern Japanese films with low budgets that there is definitely a difference in the way it looks. Yeah. And it kind of shifts the tone away from the bleak kind of atmosphere that creates the dread that you see in the Ring movies. And it turns it into something that is a bit less scary. And I think maybe because of that, it feels camp when maybe it's not all that intentional when it's camp. Like some of it is definitely intentionally camp.
Oh, for sure.
But I think even some of the scares, the bits that are supposed to be scary, like a lot of the sting is taken away from that tone. I mean, like even what I would call the marquee scare in this film, like it's little scary.
The victory slap. Slap. What a 5 finger say to the face.
Yeah.
Slap.
And when and it does happen quite early on in the film. So I was talking to you afterwards, and it's like when something like that happens very early on in the film, it does take away kind of any like a large sense of danger as well. And I mean, like the performances are pretty over the top as well in general. And like the creature effects and the CGI, it doesn't look real, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. Like I am like a big critic of CGI, especially when I have ragged on Marvel stuff, but I have to be fair and say when CGI looks bad on the low budget end of things as well.
And I think it's that kind of unreality that takes you out of it as well, because for the time, Sadako coming out of the TV, that's a really good effect for the time, right?
Yeah.
And like the makeup on Sadako herself is very minimal, but she just sells it. The actress sells it with like the way she moves.
It's just a clever use of just like minimal budget, just like shots, very like thought out shots.
Yeah, whereas in this movie, it's kind of like they've used what budget they had
to do
kind
CGI,
of, CGI, and also like maybe overly elaborate like makeup effects that are like they're not the minimal stuff that you see in on Sadako. Yeah, but it's also like not in extra enough to be realistic looking
it's
either. So it ends up kind of looking a little bit like Super Sentai kind of thing.
Actually, that's a good comparison actually. It did kind of take away from the fear, because like the ghosts, I dare say, was not ugly enough or scary looking enough. I mean, like the actress that plays Miyuki, I guess she's a witch. Which is basically
like
her normal face is scary. So that's like they should have played around on that a bit more, I think.
But I don't know. I feel like maybe he was trying not to make it too scary, because it does feel camp. There are a couple of characters. There's a medium character in this film that's definitely really like there for fun. You know, he's a fun character. So I think maybe it's intentional. Maybe like the makeup effect is intentionally not scary. So it kind of is in keeping with the kind of fun atmosphere, the fun vibes of the movie, because it is quite fun to watch.
It is fun to watch. There's definitely like the advantage of that kind of like kabuki style acting where you know the characters intense with just the look. I mean, there's a bit where like Kana Hashimoto, she's going back through her history with the husband and like how
maybe this is spoiler territory.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, I think we can probably get into spoilers at this point.
Because
we've got 2 movies to talk about. All
right.
So,
all right, spoilers warning.
I mean, I think in general, if you're looking for like a camp horror that's quite easy to watch, this is a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
But if you're looking for something to scare you, probably not.
Probably not.
If you're looking for another The Ring, not this film.
And unfortunately, I think this movie will be fairly forgotten.
I think it will find the audience it's looking for. Although that is probably a small audience at this point.
I don't regret like watching it in the theater?
No, I had a good time.
Yeah.
I had a good time. But yeah, spoiler territory.
Yeah. So like like the boss of the previous job tells like Kana Hashimoto to like stay behind and do overtime so he can like do some like, he wants to hit on her, which is not a good thing to do.
Nope.
Very like sneaky. But like,
yeah, nobody wants to do overtime.
You see her like sitting in the office alone doing overtime, and then like the guy through the door just looks, and he just immediately with his furrowed brow, is like, this is not a good guy.
Yeah, he's just
and
looking through the little window in the door with one eye.
Yeah, and it's just like
immediately what a creep.
Yeah, so like there's that kind of campiness where it's like it's very easy to digest what the characters are thinking, and there's a clear villainy to the characters who should be bad and who should be good. You even get some over the top acting from the kid who, he's just a kid. I don't want to besmirch him too much, but he is a very annoying character. Unfortunately, his acting was not the best, and this is. I've been spoiled because I'm a big Hirokazu Koreeda fan. And like, this is a different kind of kid acting, but like for those kids are like brilliant, but like, it's hard when you, I guess, are young and you haven't experienced horror.
And this is like, a pretty low budget horror film.
I think so. Yeah.
I think they didn't really need him to do that much. He's mostly yelling at his dad and chanting spells and stuff. Like he's not really the scary part of this film.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think the scary part of this film is Miyuki, the wife.
Yeah, she does a good job. Yeah, she's not in it that much.
I think,
but she has like a couple of looks and a couple of like very campy moments as well.
Yeah,
yeah. But for what she does, and the tone of the film, I think she does a good job.
Yeah, and I think at a point they flash back to young Miyuki, and young Miyuki is pretty creepy as well. I would say. She does like a very unhinged laugh at one point. I'm like, that's pretty good child acting. I like that. Like in ghost form, I'm not sure if it's the same actress in the ghost form.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I don't know.
Like I'm looking at the cast list here, and it is pretty unclear still.
Yeah,
yeah. But whoever did the acting for the Wraith, I guess, I think probably the Wraith that you see in. I'm just calling her Kana Hashimoto. In her character's name is Hiroko.
Yeah, that's a Hiroko.
Hiroko's apartment. The first time you see the Wraith, that's a pretty good design. I would say for that kind of ghost.
Yeah,
like just the dark shadows under her eyes. It's kind of got this weird, like almost like a UV lighting effect.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a great design. To kind of bring put a modern twist on the classic Onryu ghost.
Yeah.
And even the way she moves is not bad. Like it's a pretty it's not contortioning or anything. It's just a slow crawl.
Yeah.
But I think that was a pretty effective scare. The slap notwithstanding.
Yeah, she it's funny because you always wonder what a ghost. You never in a J horror really see what a ghost. Well, they do rip some people apart. Sure. But this was the first time we'd seen a ghost Rick James slap Kana Hashimoto in the face.
Kind of her reaction is kind
of really funny.
Oh, what the fuck bitch.
Yeah. What do you think about Kana Hashimoto's performance in this movie?
I think it's right for this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's got a good face for the what the fuck moments.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
She's got a very what the fuck face. Yeah. I don't know if I buy pure terror in her performance.
I don't think that was the direction though.
Because there's a lot of frozen in fear moments.
Yeah, there's a lot of I'm not even though it is a trope that it can be enjoyed. I'm not when there's an inexplicable I get being frozen in terror, but it just kind of looks silly when it's just kind of back and forth of someone who can clearly have a chance to run away.
Yeah, the ghost is slowly advancing,
and they just sitting there bug-eyed, just go yeah, and it's just it's kind of it even happens in Ring as well with who's that really popular? Hideo Nakata. He kind of does it a bit. Yeah. But I think that's overshadowed by just a very creepy atmosphere. Actually, speaking of Ringu, there is a really funny, unintentionally funny scene in the movie because they're explaining Sadako's background about how her professor or father like chucked her into the well.
Yeah.
She's like it cuts to, it's kind of like using that really broken film look.
Yeah.
And it's black and white. She's like leaning over looking at this as well. And this father, like this guy just comes in with a massive, like a thick stump and whacks like Sadako in the back of the head. And it's this really cartoonish, like thwack. It's like and it was actually really funny. And I laughed. And like, yeah, that was probably the one thing. I wonder if that was Hideo Nakata playing around with being camp a bit more.
Yeah, I think he does know how to inject a bit of fun.
I think he likes
movies.
it. Yeah. I think
it kind of is probably like a throwback to like kind of like the Shock directors back in the day, you know?
Yeah. Because when he did Ring and Dark Water, and a lot of the directors like Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Takashi Shimizu, I think broadly they didn't really want horror to be their thing. I think horror was the gateway into getting into the industry. You make a straight to video horror movie. So that's like V cinema. And that was really popular back then.
Yeah.
So straight to DVD, straight to video had a different connotation in Japan. It wasn't considered like low budget.
Because as we know, Japan is still one of the last bastions for physical media. There's Tsutayas everywhere in that place.
Tsutaya. For people that don't know, Tsutaya is basically like Blockbuster. Blockbuster in Japan. And there's
or Sanity Music for our Australian listeners.
Oh, Sanity, God.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Now, there's one in the last Sanity I saw. I think it's in Mornington. Mornington Peninsula. Sure. So if you want to visit a Sanity and drive an hour outside far east of Melbourne, go to Mornington.
At time of recording, it's still open.
I think. But yeah, so I think they kind of didn't really know what they were doing, or they hadn't discovered their visions yet. Whereas I think maybe Hideo Nakata had always wanted to do something that was more camp, maybe, because it seems like I'm just judging this I'm literally doing the judge a book by its cover, just from his posters from his previous movies, post The Ring. They're kind of like, they look camp.
Yeah.
I think there's one about like an evil bunny rabbit or something, and it's got Hikaru Mitsushima in it.
That's kind of like a Japanese design though as well. Like I find a lot of Japanese movie posters look a bit like, they look like a straight to video kind of release. They have this kind of cheap quality to the text and the imagery on it. It's kind of different to movie posters in the West, I would say.
Yeah.
Like there's one, what's a movie that we really like from last Japanese Film Festival with the girl that plays the shamisen?
Ito.
Yeah. That movie poster is
that's a rubbish movie poster. I'm sorry.
For such a good movie.
For a fantastic movie, very bad poster.
You know what I mean though? It's like a lot of these Japanese movie posters have like this kind of cheap looking quality to it.
Yeah.
And I think
do know what you mean.
Maybe that's just what Japanese audiences kind of respond to. They kind of
it's probably the selling point.
It's interesting. Yeah, marketing.
Yeah.
Who knows what that's all about.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting back to this movie, like I think it definitely is on the campus side, and I think that this quality is highlighted by the two medium characters that take place. That are involved.
There's like
in
one very anime looking guy.
Yeah. They're really fun though. I think maybe that was the highlight of the film.
They probably are. That's kind of like almost a bad thing where the highlight is like the comedic aspect of a horror.
But I enjoyed the subversion as well, because whenever like they kind of introduce these medium characters into horror films, like they usually turn out to be scam artists, I guess. And especially this guy who is clearly like designed off a scam artist.
It's like almost quite clearly a scam, but then he's actually a medium.
And him and his like super anime sidekick as well. And they have some like ghost busting adventures that culminates in them just like getting possessed and killed. A bit of fun.
The anime character's death is quite funny. Like because they get possessed by Miyuki. And then
not Miyuki though.
Oh yeah, I guess
plot
like
twist.
Plot twist. So Miyuki is, well, her backstory is that she's some kind of like witch that she had powers, and it's been passed down through generations.
Yeah.
But you find out that the source of all this like anguish is actually the kid.
Yeah. So Miyuki is just dead.
Yeah.
Right. But it's actually Miyuki's power has been passed on to her son, so that's why he was able to bring a lizard back to life, and how he's able to kind of bring something that resembles his mother back to life.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't seem to have Miyuki's actual soul in it. It's some kind of like Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. I actually really like that premise, the idea. If they had made that like look kind of like a bit more grimy, I think if it was basically, I'm just gonna say if it was shot better, like I think it just had to do with like the coloring. Like, yeah, I think it went too far into the camp where it kind of lost. It just felt too clean. I think this movie, but it has a very similar feel to. There's this horror series that I really like actually, called Tales of Terror in like Tokyo.
Okay,
and they've been going on for like. About like 15 years or so, and they're not released every year. They're released like every few years. I think the last one was a really long time ago, but it's just like they're always these really short, like 5-10 minute snippets. Sometimes some like 20, and it's like they're anthology stories.
Yeah.
And they all have this kind of cheap look as well. But some of them are actually quite frightening. And this really felt like that kind of style of film.
Okay.
I can picture the backyard thing being a very Junji Ito style of story.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
even
it's
he
true.
likes to put humor in a lot of his stuff as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes even his stories come off as a bit like too camp and not really that scary either.
Right.
So I think this is a pretty like Japanese thing.
Yeah.
Which is like, yeah, it's not really like, sometimes I prefer it to just be like scary.
Okay. You don't. I kind of enjoy like the odd characters.
I enjoy it, but like sometimes like, yeah, it's I prefer my horror to be either like more on the drama side or scary, than like the humorous side.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways, because I think a lot of the humor kind of comes from characters not behaving like you would in like if this scenario was happening. There's like a lot of off-kilter characters in Japanese horror in general, that are just being weirdos. I think Naoto does some of it in this movie.
Yeah, there's one really funny, because he's like starting to lose his shit because he's seeing his son like praying to this mound of dirt that is actually growing, and he like kind of uncovers it a little bit and sees that there is like some kind of fetus thing, and he like whacks the shit out of it. But then like he's like losing his shit because
he stops coming to work.
Because Kana Hashimoto's like starting to get sick of this shit, and she starts investigating with her camera. She goes to his place, and then he's like telling her, he's like, get out of here. And then she's like looking through this peephole through a fence, and then like filming the sun praying, and the mound like moves a bit, and then you see like Naruto just suddenly run into the frame. It is really like quick. I'm not sure I would say it was intentionally silly.
Like scampers into the frame.
It was so funny. And it's just like, get out of here. Yeah, that's it. And they show it again when she's like reviewing the footage.
But yeah, actually, you reminded me, like, one thing I really like about this movie is the combination of like a kind of like the body horror of the monster growing in the earth situation with like the astral projection wraith situation. So it's like both ghosts and zombies in the one movie, kind of. It's a good idea, I think, because it does kind of have you wondering like what the hell is going on. And then like the way they explain it, it makes a lot of sense as well. It's basically just all a manifestation of this kid's power. Like he can create vengeful spirits, but he can also reanimate flesh.
He can do a lot. He can possess people.
He can he can do a lot, except for live through getting struck by lightning twice, I guess.
And live through being burnt.
Yeah, yeah. So there are limitations to his powers. Some pretty bad CGI on that fire effect.
I think again, just thinking about it now, I think the campiness also comes from which I find odd. Like Japanese censorship is really strict, so you can't make anything like in terms of violence look too realistic. But I just think of some of the shit that's come out of Japan and I'm just shocked at how any of it how that got Audition by all rights should not have gotten past Japanese censorship. I mean, what was that movie called? The Takashi Miike one. And I always talk about it and we deleted
Ichi
it.
the Killer?
Ichi the Killer. Yeah, Ichi the Killer. I don't know how that got past censorship.
Lesson of Evil.
Lesson of Evil. I don't know how that got past censorship.
Sure.
Even it's just so I don't know where the line is, and also
But he's always been a shock director.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I wonder what the line is because as much as they don't like graphic violence, Japan will let any kind of theme slide through as long as it's themes horrible themes are fine.
Sure.
So it's quite interesting to see what is considered acceptable because there's some pretty transgressive stuff that manages to get past. So I think in the CGI on the burning kid at the end of Forbidden Play,
You think it's intentionally fake?
I think it's intentionally fake because it can't it can't look real.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is Hideo's actual vision of how he wants his movies to be, and if that is it, then that's fine.
It seems like he was having fun with it.
It's a very fun movie. For me to call it a really good horror movie, I would say no because it's not. It's not very scary.
It doesn't really bring that much new to the table.
Yeah. I like the subversion of tropes though. How nothing happens in the elevators actually.
Yes, that's true.
Only one bit where there's sludge on the on one of the numbers.
But it's just sludge. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ghost slap in there.
Yeah, the ghost slap. Yeah, the Rick James slap. It's really funny.
And a happy ending.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess there is a...
It's kind of a whatever.
Yeah, it kind of is a whatever. So after the kid dies, so presumably the line of superpowers has ended because Naoto himself shouldn't have magical powers because it's not blood related to Miyuki.
Yeah.
But then at the end, he's
Kana Hashimoto goes to see him.
Yeah,
see
and
if he's okay.
praying next to a mound of dirt that presumably has his son's remains there.
Yeah.
And the mound stirs, which doesn't make any sense according to the rules of this movie.
Yeah, but I think at that point we're just it's whatever.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. Yeah.
And the credits song is quite funny.
Yeah,
as well.
it's a very high intensity kawaii J-pop.
I think
song.
that kind of sells the he was going for camp kind of vibe with this movie. Yeah,
he was having fun.
Just a bit of fun. Yeah,
I wish that this was a bit scarier. I think because I think I'm really thirsting for a really impactful J-horror film that will just even though I don't like losing sleep, I mean who does, but I think a successful horror movie is one that keeps me up at night and looking in the dark and questioning what I'm seeing, especially with how messy my room is at times and how I leave clothes on chairs.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look in the darkness and they look like people. So it's oh shit, I scare myself, but it's just my clothes. But yeah, it's I would definitely recommend. It's I wouldn't even call this a gateway to J-horror because I'd just watch the earlier ones.
Yeah.
But if you want to get into J-horror but are too scared of Japanese ghosts, then probably watch this one.
Yeah, I think I put it in the same realm as Remember. I think if you're a fan of J-horror tropes and just want to watch something with a bit of fun, this is probably a good movie for that.
And they both had Kana Hashimoto looking very cute in both roles.
Yeah,
I think that's all she'll ever be casted as. Because I think a lot of these idol actresses, their agencies probably don't let them be ugly. It's like when we talked about IU in Broker. She's meant to kind of look like a rugged prostitute. Yeah. But she just looks as beautiful as IU ever will.
Limitations of idol actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe we can segue into the second movie we watched, which is I think aiming to be a bit scarier than this film.
Yeah. So this was Takashi Shimizu's Immersion. So this one, unlike The Forbidden Play, which is not about a play at all, this one is called Immersion because it's basically about haunted VR. Is the premise.
VR, and also there's a lot of people being immersed in water.
Yeah.
So basic premise is this team of programmers, I guess, / scientists. They're trying to create a virtual replica of an island. I think it's supposed to be an Okinawan island.
Oh, is it Okinawa?
Based in the Okinawa archipelago or something, maybe. The only reason I'm saying that is because they play the sanshin a couple of times in this.
Oh, okay. So that's an Okinawan instrument?
It's like a banjo covered in snakeskin. It's traditionally Okinawan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I think Okinawa, but I'm not 100%. But yeah, anyway, they're trying to make a virtual replica of this island. The head of this project mysteriously dies while using the VR, as does one of its key testers. And then a new member of the team has just gone to this island and is he's thrust into this situation and is trying to figure out what the hell is going on. With the help of a young lady who recently lost her dad, which turns out was the tester that passed away. So it's a spooky VR basically.
Yeah, spooky VR. So this movie we had a little greet from a pre-recorded greet from Takashi Shimizu.
Oh yeah.
So that was quite nice. That was quite cool to see. Like, you know, he thanked like the audiences to watch it in Australia, and he hoped to scare us.
Seems like a very humble creative.
I think so. Like I quite like a lot of Takashi Shimizu's movies. Like the professor at the end talked about a few, just jumping ahead a bit. She talked about Maribitu, which I watched ages ago. That is a creepy ass movie. Not super scary, but it is unsettling. There's something very eerie about it. Like, just going for the premise, it's about like this guy who is like he just films everything he does, and he goes into the sewer and he finds like this chained woman down there, and then he just like sets her free, and he finds out that she will only like eat the blood of humans to survive. And like there's a lot of POV angles from the characters, like camcorder. So it's quite eerie, and it has a weird ending, a very eerie ending. So, but not to go too much into that movie, but it's good. I'd recommend, if anyone, hard movie to find, but if anyone can get a hand of Maribitu. I don't even think there was like a 1080 rip of it anywhere. I think you kind of just have to find it like through the like the eBays or whatever. Like
if you're a fan of physical media, maybe go to that Sanity in Mornington. They might have it.
Good luck.
But I mean, probably people will know Takashi Shimizu more famously for the Ju-on series of movies, which got an American remake in the 2000s called The Grudge, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. Very terrifying movies, right?
This might be quite blasphemous, actually, but I didn't even watch Ju-on, the first Grudge. I watched the American remake before I watched Ju-on, the Grudge, like maybe 6 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
So that's quite sacrilegious of me.
Yeah,
but like,
I mean, I think a lot of people living in Australia at the time would have seen the American remake first.
The Grudge is pretty scary, man.
Like
it's
scary.
still scary. I think it holds up pretty well.
It's terrified. It's made me terrified of traditional Japanese households. I remember the first apartment you ended up in Japan was this old Japanese apartment in Nezu.
It looked like, if anyone has seen Ju-on the Grudge, I lived in one of those apartments.
Got one of those sliding closets and everything.
Fuck, yeah. I think that's probably why I didn't watch it, because I knew I was going to move to Japan.
Dark anonymous stains in the corner of the ceiling.
It was quite, it was pretty scary, man. Like, the structure of those movies is quite interesting because they're quite episodic. There's not like a character arc.
There's some like time dilation and stuff going on. It's a bit like Christopher Nolan-y at times.
It's actually a pretty interesting movie, like in retrospect, but we keep sidetracking ourselves from Immersion.
Yeah, but this movie,
This movie's got more of that J-horror look. Like, immediately, what struck me, and in comparison to The Forbidden Play, was I guess, the more dankness of the look. It did have that slightly grainier feel. It didn't look as clean as The Forbidden Play, and it didn't go for that really like pro-miss like look that like overly.
That said, the actors were still pretty glossy.
The actors were very like, everyone is pretty good looking in this movie. And to be fair, if you watch Ju-on the Grudge, like there's a lot of the victims are females in that movie. So a lot of them are actually quite good looking as well.
True.
So like the guy who plays the protagonist, like the nerd, he's a pretty like stand up, good looking guy, you know. So
typical Japanese movie star kind of look. The actor's name is Daigo Nishihata, and he plays Tomohiko.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, I think what's kind of sets him apart from the classic protagonist is he does have a bit more of a nerdy vibe. I think he's quite awkward in his interactions, especially at the start of the film.
Yeah.
They kind of set him up as this person that's maybe
just socially awkward.
Yeah, socially awkward. Yeah.
A bit rude. It's hard to buy, I guess, because it's like he's a pretty good looking dude. So like, but I guess I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, he
didn't really look like a nerd.
I think he sells it well.
But I think he did a good enough.
I think the supporting cast around him also help him sell it because their like reactions to his awkwardness are quite like I guess relatable, quite realistic.
Yeah.
Like there's this one guy that's just like, he wants to shake his hand. The guy doesn't shake his hand. He's like, "What's up with you, man?"
Yeah.
Just perpetually annoyed.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, I forgot that character's name, but like, he just spends the whole movie doing that. Ends up becoming a jerk himself.
But this movie also has the theme of technophobia, which is consistent in a lot of J horror from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like Ring and Pulse, or Kaido.
Yeah.
So they kind of bring that back, but in a modern setting. So the use of a VR system, kind of ties to that technophobia. Like, without getting into spoiler territory, how well do you think this theme has translated to like this new technology? Like comparing something like Ring, where or even Ju-on, where Kayako is kind of messing around with like security camera footage, and she kind of does that creepy thing with like the video intercom at one point. TV, analog TV signals getting fucked up and, distorting.
Yeah, I think they actually quite underutilized the VR aspect of it. I did like the points where there's like the reality is breaking between like the VR and the like the room that they had to go into, because it's often getting flooded by the water and
so water is coming out from the virtual reality world and entering the real world.
I was expecting a bit more like trippiness with the VR aspect of the movie, like the ghost is going to start in the world. And they start like questioning whether or not they're in a reality or a VR. So they never really played with that trope, I guess, and I think that's probably maybe kind of subverting that factor. But I think there's probably some budget issues as well. So the VR just ends up being kind of like a portal between like basically like a ghost world and like the real world, because at the start you see the key programmer, the chief, she gets killed, but then like he has a contact with her on the same day. So I thought there was going to be some aspect of like your spirit self in the VR as Data. So I thought that would have been quite interesting, that like a ghost is like literally Data, or your soul is Data, but you never see her again after that. It's just kind of
Yeah, it's kind of ambiguous. Some of the ghosts might be her, because you see the other character's dad from time to time in ghost form. So there might be something to that thinking. Like this movie is a little bit more confusing than the previous movie we talked about.
There's a bit more going on.
And I think it's a bit more open to interpretation as well, I would say.
I think so. Yeah.
And I will say the effects look a lot better in this film than
they do.
than in Forbidden Play. Like you mentioned, like when the virtual reality world is kind of like encroaching on the real world, there's a bit where like a Torii gate comes out of the screen that they use, and that effect looks pretty cool and maybe practical, not sure, but like there's bits where like hands are kind of coming out of walls and and even just the imagery of and I was saying like the imagery of the water like immersing all the electrical cables and all the technology. Like I'm looking around the room that we're in now, and there's like all these cables, and I'm like, I don't like the idea of cables being in water. It just seems like bad OH&S. And I think the setting as well is quite good. Like the island setting is a little bit different from the urban environments that I'm used to seeing in J-horror. Like I think it opened it up to kind of like a more spiritual take on this format, because there is a shaman character in this, and
not as camp as
not like,
just a normal.
That's true. There was
pretty normal one.
A country shaman. Maybe, she's not as over the top, but I do like that kind of that spiritual side of this story as well. I think like we've seen it in The Wailing before, and I think The Wailing is a really good kind of representation of how that kind of shamanistic side of things can be like also terrifying. And I think they use that to decent effect in this film. Again, this movie's not all that scary.
I think this movie did suffer similar problems to The Forbidden Play, which maybe is its use of CGI, I think as well. Like
it looks better though.
It looks better, but there's like bits of the ghosts that are kind of there's like an over elaborate design because there's like boils on her or something, or like barnacles, but you can kind of see the way that they're animated, that it just kind of looks a bit uncanny. Like you can kind of tell that it's CGI as well.
I think that only happens once, I think, from memory. I think the design of the main ghost is pretty good in general. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is still just a little bit too much going on with the look.
Too much going on, like plot-wise as well, as you're saying. There's a few characters in this film.
Would you say that? Because Ju-on is pretty convoluted as I would
but
say.
like Ju-on is like quite episodic, I think. So there's like, it kind of stops and ends, I'm talking about the original one. I don't really remember the Sarah Michelle Gellar one that much.
I think it was a fairly close adaptation.
Oh, okay,
from memory.
But in the Sarah Michelle Gellar one had one central main character, whereas
there was also like the Bill Pullman character. He's got like his own little story. But
there's like the schoolgirl character and like this old man character who I honestly think they had more of the heart of the story because they are outcasts. So like there's a theme of like people being ostracized, and you can't like the ghost herself is an Onryu. It is a ghost that is born out of vengeance, which we find out later on in a pretty horrific like flashback, which is probably one of the more disturbing aspects of the film. But they're kind of like, especially the schoolgirl, she's super random. And you said, I didn't notice this at first, like you said her acting
very flat.
She's not great.
And again, this is a young actor, so I'm not gonna like lay into it too much. But just some of the just the effort behind some of the acting is not quite there, especially when you see her alongside like the more seasoned actresses in the cast.
Even though I don't recognize any of them.
To me, there was a clear difference anyway. But you're right. Like there are a lot of characters in this film. I think for the most part they're pretty likable, but it does kind of end up in some of them getting sidelined. I mean, at least it leads to some kind of body count, which
that's true.
Forbidden Play didn't really have.
It adds to stakes. People do die in this film, and the ghost is not. The ghost ain't playing nice. The ghost eventually starts like there's a very popular like quote from the Guilty Gear character, like Totsugeki, It's like basically like this pirate girl character makes like these dolphins just appear from the ground, like from just a illusionary puddle of water and just like attack people. So the ghost comes out and like just yeets people into like this pool of water.
It's a pretty funny effect.
It's really funny. It's like, I mean, when I see it, like I think some people like next to us, they like jumped and gasped, but like our reaction is always just laughing when we see this kind of stuff.
Again, I think this movie kind of suffers from there's no lingering fear in it because there are no scenes where there's like a long drawn out like spooky scene, you know, like the scenes, the scares come pretty quick when they happen.
Like
so
there's a typical girl's having a bath and then hand grabs her.
Yeah, but like the hand grabs her like 3 times in that scene.
Yeah, and then
whereas in Ju-on it just happens once, but because it's longer, you feel it more.
And there's something about the CGI as well in that scene, kind of like it looked a bit off as well.
It's just hands appearing out of nowhere.
And it also looked, it did look like Super Sentai as well, as you were saying.
But yeah, I think what interests me more about this film is maybe the complexity of the story, which I guess we can get into in spoiler territory. Do you have anything to say before we get into spoilers?
No, I also think this is a very fun movie. Definitely scarier than The Forbidden Planet,
but still not overly scary.
Yeah, I think this is a good entry point if you are wanting to get into Japanese horror, but it's not too.
I wouldn't say it's the strongest though.
No, not the. I mean, like. If I was gonna, I'd just say watch the classics. But like, I
would say like Dark Water is good if you are sensitive to spooks, but you also want to watch like a classically good film. But yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, Dark Water. It's got a few like lingeringly, like dread scenes. Yeah, that's one of Hideo Nakata's best. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, like I guess we can do spoilers for this film, Immersion. So yeah, like we alluded to, Immersion kind of has a double meaning. There's the immersion of people going into the VR world, but then there's also people getting drowned.
You're getting immersed in water, like literally.
So the spirit is revealed to be a spirit which they call Imajo, is that right?
Yeah, Imajo. They discovered and
so this is her origin story. Her evil ghost origin story is that she was a slave on this island, and her owner basically molested her, and then his wife found out. So his wife tortured her and punished her and basically strung her up on a torii gate, and people threw rocks at her and then they left her out there until the high tide drowned her.
Yeah.
So after that she was out for revenge on the whole island, basically just killing people and driving people mad.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I mean, don't really know what happens to her, but she seems to kind of have like her influence has maybe faded away over time.
Yeah.
But then the scientists like creating the VR world have kind of like given her a portal into the real world, I guess.
That's when it goes to the point where it's like it's not actually Imajo. It's like there's a new curse from Shigeru, the old guy.
Yes.
So this was a bit confusing. So his mother was basically like, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but she was like the town whore. Yeah. And she sold herself
she seduced all of the village men.
Yeah, that's probably basically a better way to say it. Like, I'm kind of tired, so all sort of basic words
and that
out of my
caused her
mouth.
to be ostracized by the villagers. And also caused Shigeru himself to be ostracized.
Yeah.
But they do say that she was possessed by Imajo as well.
Okay.
So and that made her do that. So,
but is that what just them saying it, or like? Because I wasn't sure what the shaman said. Like she became Imajo. Like she just became the new Imajo's curse.
No, I think they say she was possessed by Imajo or driven mad by Imajo or something like that.
Yeah.
So basically, Shigeru's, and this is where it gets confusing because Shigeru's motive is to use these scientists to create a bridge between the worlds for Imajo to come back to the island and get revenge for his mother and also for the island ostracizing him, I guess.
Yeah,
so he's essentially a bad guy, right?
Yeah, he's the bad guy.
Okay.
So the villagers will have, because he's like, you see him get bullied by everyone at the start of the film and throughout the film. And it turns out that he should be bullied because he wants to get everyone killed. But he shouldn't be bullied.
And this is kind of like weird because he's got this kind of like friendship with the schoolgirl.
Yeah.
And it's like portrayed as quite a sweet relationship. So when he takes kind of a villainous turn, even though his motivation is kind of like you can empathize with it to an extent, but essentially he still wants to get the whole village killed by releasing
he
this
takes
evil
her to like a
spirit.
safe place, doesn't he?
He does, but like because of that relationship, I still didn't buy 100% his like villainous turn.
Yeah.
Because he's just an old dude.
I don't think he was. I don't think he was supposed to be villainous. I think it's just like the circumstances. He became like another like vengeful ghost in himself.
Okay.
He wants to get revenge on the villain because he ends up like jumping off the cliff at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. After he successfully, or to his knowledge, he successfully releases Imajo on the island. He commits suicide.
Yeah.
Which is also a pretty dick move, I would say.
Yeah.
Just piecing out after releasing this wraith from the world.
So did he kill his mum?
Yeah.
Because you find out his mum is in there.
I think he does. He does kill his mum.
Yeah.
So, in one of the flashback scenes, the mum tries to almost molest him.
Yeah.
And then she's kind
That's
of
pretty fucking heavy.
Yeah, she kind of wants him to kill her at that point.
Yeah.
I believe is the implication.
Yeah.
And then you find out she's like buried in his wall.
Yeah. So like I said, those scenes are probably the most disturbing. The flashback, even the way that they're shot as well, like they're shot using that kind of like Super 8 look kind of thing, and it's just like really damaged film. And the acting
of that lady as well is particularly creepy.
Yeah. For such a short period of time there in the film. Yeah. I did like some of the imagery, like when the ghost was in kind of half a spectral form in the virtual world. Like, that's kind of creepy. But also kind of funny because she's like slowly getting more of a form, and she's just, her face is she's in pain, in so much pain because of Grudge.
Yeah,
rules.
I guess going back to like the comparisons of the use of technophobia, I guess. So there's a bit where they're like looking at footage, the last footage that their deceased director saw before she died.
Yeah.
And like there's an apparition in the VR headset, and like they freeze it at a point.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to, I think, look scary.
Yeah.
But to me, it didn't really have the same scare factor as anything that we'd seen in like Ju-on or Ring.
Yeah, I think so.
It had that kind of like digital glitch look to it, I guess.
Yeah, and
versus the analog, like, you know how when an analog TV glitches out, like it can stretch and contort the image.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really happen in digital. It just looks a little bit blurry.
It's just a little bit blurry, a little like blocky. Yeah.
So I don't think I think we've always said that making modern technology scary is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And I can't really pinpoint why it is difficult. I think it's just the aesthetic is not as creepy.
Yeah, I wonder, like, is that us just growing up in the VHS generation? Like, I guess I wonder if there's anyone younger than us who's watched this movie and thinks that aesthetic looks particularly creepy. There's actually one scene, I will say, in a different movie, Men, where she's like looking at her phone and it like glitches out, and then for a second it's a frame of a guy like screaming, and that's actually quite scary. It's unfortunately not really played upon for the rest of the movie.
I think it has to be relatable as well. I think it has to be the type of scary thing that could happen to you yourself with the technology that you possess.
Yeah, because you and I use VR every day,
and
don't
that's
we?
the thing. Nobody uses VR at this point in time. So it's not a thing where you like watch this movie and then freaky stuff happens on the VR and then you go home and you look at your VR headset and you're like, not today. Because nobody has a VR headset. Like not many people anyway. So I think that kind of the effectiveness of the spooky stuff that happens in Ring and Ju-on is that it is technology that you can find at home.
Yeah.
And like these things could happen to you after the fact. So I think that probably takes a bit of the sting away from the scares in this film. I think so, too.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier as well about the use of VR and like not knowing, like the potential for not knowing whether you're in a VR world or in the real world.
Yeah.
I think that plays right at the end of the film.
Yeah.
When
it does.
After defeating the ghost, right?
Which is kind of like, to me, that was kind of like a, whatever ending as well. It didn't really impact me, unfortunately.
Like what's the implication of that is that the two main characters are maybe stuck in the virtual world?
Yeah, stuck in the virtual world. I mean... Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really feel anything for that. And then like that's not even the final form of the ending. The true ending in a kind of a post-credits or mid-credits sequence where it's the schoolgirl, she goes to the Torii gate and she's singing a song that Shigeru has been singing throughout the whole film as an ode or a prayer to Imajo. And then she sings and then she goes and walks into the water and then like disappears in the water, and then she's basically becoming the new Imajo. So there is a theme of like that kind of being ostracized and like, because she's like bullied.
Yeah, it's just a cycle of never-ending grudges, I guess. On society.
Yeah. But also I was kind of like, fair. I guess like, everyone's a bit of a knob on the island anyway.
So did they actually destroy the Torii Gate in the real world, or what's going on there?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. They destroyed the physical one in the real world. But there's another one. No.
Because if the two main characters are in the virtual world at the end of the film, when did that happen? When did the
Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they destroyed the virtual one because when like... Because then the girl is actually like... Yeah, so maybe they didn't.
Maybe upon a rewatch, we'll see like there's a point in the film where like actually... they do transition into the virtual world and everything from that then on plays out actually in the virtual world. Like,
and that's when the Soul Revelation music will start playing.
So maybe he did try to play into that sense of non-reality. But I think maybe it was a bit too subtle.
Maybe too subtle. Maybe this film does deserve another rewatch because, admittedly, at some points, if I wasn't chewing on popcorn, I was slowly nodding off. This is not the film's fault. Like you and I have been pretty busy the past couple of days, so we were pretty tired.
I mean, like I think this movie as well is. Yeah, it's okay, I think.
I'd say so as well. I think it's okay. I feel bad because when I go to these festivals, like I do want people to watch these movies because I enjoy it. Like, and I wish I hopefully will have a bit more time to catch some more films at the Japanese Film Festival, which I'll probably just mention on and off on some other episodes if I do watch them. But no, I do really appreciate these festivals because these are sometimes like the only times you'll ever see this movie because like the likelihood of some of these films getting a wide release is pretty slim to none, really. I mean, I was lucky enough to watch Cobweb again when I saw that at MIFF, and then it was playing at Cinema Nova for like a couple of weeks. And then I don't think it's screening anymore. So yeah, like it's I would like to like these movies to be more or readily accessible. So I would encourage, like, even though I wonder if our reviews on both of these movies lent towards the negative. These are good films and they're quite enjoyable.
Yeah. And these directors deserve
they do.
respect.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they are pioneers of this genre,
Yeah,
really.
definitely. You can't take that away from them.
Yeah. And I think like if you are a fan and you can appreciate like the history behind this particular brand of J-horror, you definitely appreciate these films.
There's a lot of cultural shit that goes on behind these films, especially if I'm listening to the doc. I forgot her name, sorry, but like the lecture at the end, and she talked about the
Japanese folk tales that they reference
the contortionism,
the themes,
It's interesting because when we were talking earlier about like the states of J-horror, a couple of the audience members were like, can you recommend some like noticeable like J-horror films
that came out recently?
And they are all films that I've seen and they're all old. There's like Noroi, The Curse, which is hard to get your hands on. She talked about Maribitu, Dark Water.
Yep.
So it's like you can tell that there's not much post 2008, I would say, which is really sad because like it is a great genre and it's like one of my favorite genres, but it's hard to innovate it, I think. But there was so much good shit back in the golden. Even the ones that were not particularly good were still like very spooky. There's a pretty underrated one. I think you and I watched it years ago with you. Creepy Hide and Seek.
Oh yeah.
So that like that has really creepy imagery and it's drooping in atmosphere. And it's quite scary. That made me lose sleep as well.
To be honest, I feel like these movies, particularly the second one, could have achieved that level of spookiness. It's just the execution is not quite there. And I mean, I find it really hard to fault the direction, but I think it is somewhat part of the problem. I think I was saying before to you just on the way home that there is like a lack of good sound design in this film. Like when you think of movies like Ring and Ju-on, like there's a very clear sound that you can associate to them. Like in Ju-on, it's that like that fucking sends chills down your spine, right? And with Ring, it's like that static sound followed by that high pitched whine, like it's and the ringing of the phone as well. Like that's iconic, right? But in this film, it's like rattling chains.
You mentioned there's not a marquee scare in either of the films.
They
except
don't
the Rick James slap.
They don't languish in the like build up, right? And the scares, when they do happen, they kind of just happen.
I wish these films were scarier. But like, I think the upside is I'll be able to sleep pretty well tonight.
They're fun.
They're fun to watch,
fun
movies,
and they don't, I guess, they don't linger with you. Whether that's a positive or negative probably depends on your mood.
I mean, who knows? Like, we haven't tried sleeping tonight. Maybe we'll be scared. Maybe
I'm never using my VR headset again.
We'll never have to fucking afford one anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I'll never get to play Half-Life, Alex.
I'll never get to play Laundry Simulator. But no, I think I think it might be that J-horror is something that, belongs in our memory, maybe for now. Anyway, I think maybe somewhere along the line there might be a resurgence as a lot of like this kind of genre film. They do sometimes resurge, I guess.
Well, I think this is a day and age of like horror video games, the day and age of elevated horror, which I thoroughly enjoy, but I also don't find particularly scary. But I also factor in the fact that you and I are old and we have seen a lot of horror. And I still wouldn't watch a horror movie. Depending on the horror movie, I wouldn't watch it by myself per se. But I do watch like a lot of the classic ones on my own because I don't really find them that scary anymore.
I mean, there are scary movies out there. We watched Gongjiam recently, and I found that pretty scary.
Yeah, that did surprisingly linger with me for like a night or so.
So it can be done. But maybe the appetite is not there for now.
Well, you know what I have to say about that, Dan? It's kind of a soft generation.
Well, maybe people prefer hot scary games. Scary games are really fun as well.
Scary games are really fun.
So yeah, like maybe the medium has shifted for this kind of horror. And there's definitely no shortage of horror movies as a broad genre.
Like Five Nights at Freddy.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's good or bad.
Middling is what I hear. But I think, like horror in general is a genre that is constantly evolving.
Yeah, horror will never die. Yeah, there's always going to be a horror movie.
Maybe J-horror or that brand of J-horror was just part of horror's evolution.
Yeah.
But yeah, not bad films by any stretch.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of J-horror, I reckon you'd enjoy both of these films as much as we did.
If you're a fan of horror, yeah, maybe.
It sounds like we've been complaining a lot about these films, but I genuinely enjoyed both of these films.
Yeah. They're fun watches. I enjoy it. I did enjoy these movies. Like, I did enjoy the campiness of a bit of the both of these films. I enjoyed the premise of Immersion
I didn't mind
a lot.
at all that they weren't really bleak films either.
Yeah. I do like a bleak horror movie, especially when it comes to J-horror. But
it would have been good if we got one of both, one camp and one overly bleak.
Well, I think Immersion was trying to be a bit bleak, but it didn't really step into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of like,
there's terrible
stuff
things.
that humans do to each other in that film, but it's not overly graphic or disgusting.
Not too heavy, but I don't know. Which it depends on which generation you come from.
All right, Tavi. But yeah, I
love you Gen Z guys out there. I know some of you are not that weak.
They've already stopped listening to this.
This is too long. 1 minute 30 seconds. So I should test it out. Just me just banging out Gen Z until I become viral. Then people actually are listening to the end of the episode.
But yeah, I think that's us for tonight, right, Tommy?
Yeah, I think so. I think we are gonna die if we keep talking.
I'll turn into a vengeful spirit.
Yeah.
If I die from overwork due to this podcast.
Haunted podcast. Ooh, how can you make a fucking...
There's your technophobia.
There you go. Fucking... put this up on the screen. Jamie, put this up on the screen. It's like a jump scare. Slap. Let me ask you this.
You like get an anonymous phone call. It's like, hello? Let me ask you this.
I don't want to have...
All right, guys. I think that's us for now. We're delirious.
Yeah. Let's say goodbye. Yeah.
But what do you think about these two films, The Forbidden Play and Immersion? If you have somehow managed to see them, which is your favorite J-horror film? Let us know. You can get in touch with us at 2asianblokes@gmail.com. You can join our Facebook group to be part of the conversation, or you can follow us on Instagram at 2asianblokes to see what we're up to.
You be Dan and I be Tavi, and we'll be signing off. Yeah, good night. I'm not going to try to be scary because I'm too tired, but it's all right. All right, see you later, guys.
見るな